Permaculture is talking about facts. If we want things to change, we have to talk with numbers. That's how things work generally in the world right now, because there's no place where capitalism haven't been around the world. They have to prove something, even if that was known for thousands of years, that keeping the water in the soil, it's something which would benefit the plants. You have to prove it to the scientific community so that the practices change. There is indigenous knowledge, which proves that just by knowledge passed by the ancestors. But this is lost for many parts of the world. And we are in a colonized world.
Would you like to share a little bit about your background, where you're from, who you are?
My full name is Christos Karistinos. I am changing a lot of definitions of what I am right now, but I would say I'm mostly a farmer, a permaculture teacher and designer. And sometimes I also facilitate groups and processes. I'm part of one of the few organizations, NGO, of promoting permaculture in Greece. And I'm currently living in a village in the outskirts of Chania in Crete, which is an island in Greece. And yeah, like I made a big transition in my life through a very conventional childhood and lifestyle in the city to eco communities and then to rural environment where I'm trying to set up a community with other people around here in a pretty much international environment here, but more like unofficial work being done here, not really an eco village yet. Around
Amazing.
30 years old for the people who can't see me. My main passion at the moment is working with the land and planting stuff.
Would you like to share a little bit about your reasons or where that interest in these sorts of topics came up, and maybe also the situation in Greece and how that relates to the work you're doing?
Yeah, I think I'm an example of what's happening with my generation in Greece, because I am 30. Around when I was 15, there was a big shock in Greek society where a 15-year-old boy was shot by a policeman. And that created a big uprising in most of the cities in Greece back in 2008. And I would say that was the beginning of political unrest in Greece, which created a lot of political movement of self-organization, autonomy in all parts of Greece. And that was very lively between 2008 and 2015. So that's also me coming into adulthood and being very active in the political movements about change in society in Greece. There was not a lot of ecological movement back in the times. I would say since 2015, the whole thing went down after, let's say, false, not real referendum, which happened about exiting EU or not, which is in the end supposed to leave EU, but in the end we stayed in EU and still is there. Greece is actually a bankrupt country following the orders of the IMF and the EU since then. And yes, I think many people got disappointed and they turned into more self-organized solutions, maybe also outside of the cities. I'm also part of that, moving away from Athens, where I was studying engineering, and creating the solution I would like to see in the world, the solution I would like to propose to other young people around Greece. Also, I traveled a bit outside of Greece to get some inspiration and to live in communities. Since then, I'm working permaculture and spreading the word about communities and building what we would like to see in the world. I would say it's connected with the history of Greece. I'm responding to the needs of my time.
I liked it a lot because there's a movement towards the urban rather than away from the urban. I find that really interesting and inspiring also, that maybe in these difficult situations, it's becoming clear that there is a need for community, there is a need for knowing your neighbor, there is a need for being connected with the land also. And I find that really interesting. Your work is focused both on like social aspects and the ecological aspects. If you would like to maybe talk in that context a little bit about permaculture, how that relates, and your experiences with communities.
Yeah, I can talk about that. Getting away from traditional politics in Greece, I was always a bit different from a traditional leftist or anarchist, going there with my bicycle and being vegetarian. I was not fitting in the criteria for a standard guy in Athens. So I was feeling I was belonging to a different kind of community, which seems like it's more international and it already existed a long time ago, since the 70s. And that's a permaculture community. I got interested in that and I heard about it through a collective urban farm I was part of in Athens. Since then, it has been like going deeper from one course to PDC to just going deeper and deeper about permaculture, and until I would really define myself as a permaculturist. Because these three ethics that permaculture stands for, it's really represents also my ethics. There can't be people care if there is no earth care. There can't be earth care if there is no people care. And if we don't share our resources equally among us and with future generations, there will not be any justice. These were my ethics and values before I entered permaculture. And it was just there in front of me to go into it and to explain what for me was always a question of how nature works. I have this amazing opportunity to understand nature and work with it and not against it, and make living and practice it and regenerate instead of just going against what already exists, which I appreciate. I appreciate the work of going against things, but my psychology and my anim also wanted, like, I would say, a bright side of things as well.
What you just shared also speaks to the whole different narrative of maybe regenerative versus sustainable. Permaculture approach seems to not say that humans are separate or detrimental to nature. There is a way to live together that is mutually beneficial, which I find really interesting. If you would also like to share a little bit about what that does psychologically to you working on the land. How does that make you feel being outside, working with your hands and so on?
I think I'm realizing more and more that the biggest issue with at least the Western humanity, how we see things from this side of the world, is our disconnection with nature. This has led to so many psychological problems, so many diverted visions of the world. I would say I can talk also about political problems. I would say sexism could be connected to that also. It could be racism, could be just dividing people, just dividing in general. It's just a very Western concept and very disconnected from nature, connected even to Christianity and spirituality that is not connected with nature. Coming back to work with the land, it really means to reconnect on a physical level and also on a spiritual level with what feeds us and what really is our medicine, what we need for in order to be humans. It's really understanding again what is our role in the ecosystem. Sustainability would say to us that we are a plague, that we have to sustain ourselves from destroying the planet. And what I would say instead of that, it's saying if we really understand our role in our ecosystem, we can really become part of the ecosystem. And that would mean working with. That would mean we are not the plague. We are not a problem for the planet. We can be just to reallocate ourselves and how we use the resources and where do we direct other energy. And then we can just be one of the things that exist in our ecosystem. The very interesting thing was in my last course, I did a session, very experimental one, about what do people think that it's the human's role in the ecosystem. And everybody was saying, we are using a lot of resources. We are just fucking up the planet. And then just like all these negative things. And I was like, yeah, just get rid of that. This is what we are doing wrong. What can we do in the ecosystem? What kind of role we can do in the ecosystem? And that's basically, I'm not going to go into the detail, but the thing is that we can take care of the earth. And that's a role that is quite unique and exciting and interesting if we really do that collectively.
I really resonate with that. I also wonder what that has to do with more indigenous ways of seeing animism. We had some lectures on deep ecology, seeing humans as one of the many species. It's beyond anthropocentrism. It's a way that takes into account all of life. If you have anything to share, what I know, permaculture is also like an integration of more like the animist, the deep ecology, but then also the hard science, like the science of how ecosystems work. And maybe if you want to share anything about this interesting combination.
Yeah, permaculture is talking about facts. If we want things to change, if we want to do things properly, we have to talk with numbers. That's how things work generally in the world right now, actually, because there's no place where capitalism haven't been around the world. And that's how things work right now. You have to prove something, even if that was known for 1,000 of years, that keeping the water in the soil is something which would benefit the plants. You have to do lots of measurements and make papers about it and prove it to the scientific community so that the practices change. There is indigenous knowledge, which proves that just by knowledge passed by the ancestors. But this is lost for many parts of the world. And we are in a colonized world where we have to deal with companies and we have to deal with scientific based decisions in the best cases, not profit, probably it's profit based decisions. And permaculture can lead to profit as well, because it is a science. Regeneration gives resources both to humans and the ecosystem. And it can do it in a way that can be more productive. It's a word, very controversial word, but it is more productive than a conventional way of producing things. And this is scientifically proved. I just, next to me here, I have many permaculture books, but I don't know, like some guys from USA, they're just like next to a cornfield, food forest. How many calories do I produce? How many calories does the cornfield produce? I'm producing much more in less space. And that's like objective numbers proving that permaculture is better for us. I was mentioning that instead of going very far away to a US example, I can just talk about like a very local. This year, farmers had very few production of olive oil because of climatic conditions. The permaculture field, which is just around the corner here, just had normal production, not a very high one, but because the climate, of course, affects. But also from farmers, I had no productions. To see an olive grove that has production in a year that is like very few can have that without any use of chemical fertilizers or something, just by diversity, because there is a lot of biodiversity over there. It's a huge example of how to prove in practice, really, how resilient these systems are.
It's something we need as humanity to survive. Not only just to prove that we are resilient to the climate crisis ahead of us.
Are you mostly working with other young people that also moved to the countryside, or are you also connecting with the local population and older farmers and so on? If you want to share anything, I assume there's also probably pretty different worldviews there. How do you deal with that difference?
We are a mixture. So there is local people who just are more alternative, let's say, and they understand what's going on in the world and they've chosen sides somehow. There is also international people who were travelers and then they stayed along. And my approach is always to have respect to the local culture already existing on the place. I myself play traditional music, and we are a band who play this kind of music, which makes it very attractive for people also to see our lifestyle. But at the same time, I have lots of friends which are farmers, and they've been farmers for their whole lives. And I have a lot of respect for them also, for the simplicity of their lives. I find myself being created right now. It's in the spectrum of something more new age, but at the same time connecting back to the roots, which I find like the appropriate thing to happen at this moment, because both things are needed.
I really like that in a further climate change scenario. What I somewhat not resonate with that much in the whole ecosystem movement is that there is this approach of making this separate community of mostly privileged individuals that have good education and thus know about the risks of climate change, versus what you're doing seems to be very much connected with the local people. And if you would like to share anything about your vision for community, especially also with different values and so on.
So I think my vision of community has been shaping a lot since I started my journey in search of community. I was very much inspired by also this, I don't know how to call it, stereotypical community, a bit isolated, self-sufficient. We're doing everything right and creating this new society where everybody's equal and stuff like that, you know?
Yeah.
So I started from that, and then I'm just like keep changing according to the reality that I'm facing in the existing projects. The ideal thing is very far from what can really exist in the now and here. I've volunteered, I've tried living in different kinds of communities, from an off-grid village in Spain to occupied village in the north of Spain, to more Irish eco-village, more kind of fancy as the one you're saying, like privileged, to a village in the south of Greece, you know, like
Yeah.
where people just go out, they just cut the wood, just still cultivate the land, and they're going to church every Sunday. Yeah. And the last community I lived in, which was the La Cabe eco-village in Spain, has really shaped a different meaning for me about the revitalization of the rural areas. So I told you, I'm adapting to the need of my times. It was a blind spot for me of how much need there is and how much abandoned land there is in the rural areas of Europe. Whole world is on this right now, but let's say that something is very strong, at least in Europe right now. So this is where community was built, and this is where communities still exist in the world. They also thrive where there is nature, where there is land. The possession of land is very important in order for communities to thrive. So for me, it became very clear, in order to be a community and to create this connection between us, there needs to be land that it's worked on, it's producing, it's regenerating our emotions to our food. It's very much connected. So community is built and will be built around land. It was very clear for me that it needs to be in the rural areas, and to mix traditional knowledge with the new knowledge from permaculture and social tools like nonviolent communication, which is very much needed, because rural areas got abandoned because some things didn't work financially, socially, spiritually. All these aspects didn't really work. So we need to invent new things to also revitalize the rural areas.
I resonate with that. I also remember us talking briefly about bioregionalism. If you could dream a little bit in the future, if you would have to imagine a utopian society, maybe connected to permaculture, bioregionalism, or this sort of living, what would your ideal look like?
I can talk about a real example, because what's happening with the Zapatistas at the moment, I would say that it's quite close to the idea of bioregionalism. In which sense? Zapatistas movement exists and continues existing after a long time of war against it by the Mexican state and paramilitary, because there is this very specific natural environment which is called Selva Lacandona, which is one of the most beautiful and biodiverse forests in the southeast Mexico. So this community of communities, I would say, let's say this whole region, it's populated by small communities which practice their own autonomy. And they organize themselves, even though there are different tribes, sometimes they speak different languages. The main thing they have in common is that their connection to the land. The land is this specific land. It's the land of their ancestors, it's the forest, this plant species. So when we talk about connection to the land, it's not something very abstract. It's very specific. They have connection to corn, for example, and their spirituality is based a lot on corn, or their connection to ceiba, which is a specific tree that grows there. And it's so bioregionalism, if we translate it in different contexts, would be people connected to the specific natural characteristics of the environment and organize themselves when they identify between each other, when they identify that they have this in common. If we're all people who live by the sea, we have probably the same nutrition, we have probably the same materials to construct our houses, we have probably same culture, because the natural environment really affects our psychology and everything. So it's more easy and practical to organize ourselves and be one in governance, in resources management, and everything else that needs to be in health, education, and everything.
That is really inspiring. And you have been at the Zapati, or you have been visiting the Zapatistas lately, as you told me. If you would like to also talk to your work there. I know that, I'm not sure if that's still the case, but the Zapatistas, as you said, they were fought against by the state and paramilitaries. And it seems they now have somewhat found a stable, mutually beneficial, both for the people there and also for the natural world. But they have arrived at this place through armed conflict. If you can speak to any of that, yeah.
I think there needs to be some context on that, which indigenous people in the area of Southeast Chiapas have been, oppressed and actually made slaves since Spanish arrived, and even beforehand, some of the tribes there has been a continuous elimination of these people. There has been a slow flow to death about whole civilizations.
Genocide.
So, it's almost like a slow quite fast when the conquistadores arrived, but afterwards, after the Mexican state also was founded, still these populations were very much oppressed and very much taken advantage and actually being killed. There was no space for life for them. Life for them would mean their right on the land, the right to speak the language, the right to practice their spirituality, the right to health and education. All this didn't exist. The response of this armed rebellion, it's just it's like a cry for life. We're anyway being killed.
Yeah.
We're anyway being robbed our land. We anyway don't have anything to lose. So let's just go for it. Let's organize ourselves and ask we deserve space for us to thrive, our autonomy. This was unimaginable for the context of now, but also for back then, when the whole world was just going more capitalistic and just taking advantage of the last natural reserves which exist in the world. And this community that this population is living in one of the last natural reserves of the planet. It's amazing. I mean, it's very beautiful to see the jungle there. But they were not possessing their own land. So the rebellion, and that's why they're called also Zapatistas of Zapata and the Mexican Revolution. It's like one of the first and primary objectives is to take back the land and have autonomy over it. And from that, all the rest can be generated. So I think this is a basic context to understand the Zapatistas movement and why 30 years after, it's still there. I don't know if I can say thriving or not, because it's something very subjective, but it's still there and exists. And the results are profound. The wisdom of how these communities are being governed, if you compare it with how the society works outside, it's amazing. There's a lot to talk about. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Also, for listeners, is it possible to visit the Zapatistas? I know they have something like, I'm not sure if university is the right word, but they have some sort of learning environment. How is it with visiting this place?
Very recently, in November, the centers of governance of Zapatistas, which are called caracoles, were closed down for visitors. They were open for visitors only for the 30th year anniversary, where people from outside also could come and be part of the celebration of the communities for what they've succeeded until now. At the moment, it's pretty hard to visit the communities if somebody's not really connected with people. There is a big danger at the moment, which is the narco mafias. So what's happening there right now is that on the borders with Guatemala, there is big narco cartels, which are attacking and occupying land, not only belonging to Zapatistas, but also belonging to other communities, as they name it, low-density war. So the Mexican state right now, after the first war which did against Zapatistas in the 95, 98, and there was a big international resistance to that, what is happening is that it's illegally funding or supporting also the US, of course, paramilitary groups taking actions in the area. And right now, the most prominent are the narco cartels. They are occupying land, producing drugs, and at the same time, creating alternative corrupted governance system ruling by power and guns. It's controversial to say if it's something which is visitable, but for sure, it's something to be studied on and approach, and it's to take responsibility on that. But there is also so many studies and books also written about what they did in these 30 years. I can suggest some afterwards, yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much. It also reminded me somewhat of what happened in Colombia. As far as I'm concerned, Zapatistas also have a Marxist orientation. And I find it very inspiring. The whole thing turned out to be working. What is also inspiring is that while in Colombia there are still regions controlled by the FARC and other guerrilla groups, the guerrilla groups are now, while they still claim to be Marxist, they are actually turning into narco-guerrillas, which is quite concerning.
It's one of the reasons why Zapatistas have banned alcohol and drugs inside the communities. That's a practice that also has been followed in North European communities to ban the use of alcohol and drugs. But they did it not out of instinct. It's just a practice of not turning into what you're saying right now, because it's very easy to happen.
Do you want to share anything about your future aspirations? Are there any projects coming up? Are you planning to stay in Crete?
Definitely, I'm planning to buy land and build like my co-op house around here. With the work we're doing with my organization, we're trying to get the different permaculture projects around Greece organized together. One thing we're working on is to get funding and quality volunteers. This is a huge problem in Greece. At the same time, we're trying to create a permaculture association, give them some quality and some standards about the permaculture work in Greece and to promote it and make it more visible. We're having some newspaper articles recently about our work and some events coming up in Athens talking about eco-villages. I think it's growing locally. That's something tangible. I don't know if I can work on a global scale right now.
Yeah.
But at least on a regional level, I'm doing my best to promote these things. And at the same time, I'm just talking about myself, but at the same time, it's collective work, first of all. So the credits behind all this work goes from my partner to who's next to me, who's supporting me and also doing amazing work in different fields, from all these people who are doing in every aspect something regenerative, society, or just or being a farmer. So I'm valuing a lot the diversity around me, and I love living in a diverse thing, which I wouldn't not even call it a community or just a neighborhood or whatever is that. Just it's diverse and everybody's trying their best to fulfill the dreams. It's on this ethics of taking care of the earth. And in the end of the story.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Thank you for sharing. Maybe as a last small question, do you have any message to the audience that you would like to put out there?
It might sound hard to be a farmer, so I'm not proposing that to anybody, especially on this climate thing. But the world needs more than this. It's like 3% of the total population of the world that is farmers. Can we really let this 3 or, I don't know, maximum 5% of the world producing all the food for us? I think it's too little. So I'm not proposing, but maybe saying that it's too few of us. So we need definitely more people working on the land, hands-on, and this is where the real biodiversity can be locally built. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Christos. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, me too. Thank you for the invitation. It's nice to share with people I've met.
It was really nice. Thank you.